If you are looking for a paraglider that generates impressive lift and efficiency without sacrificing too much in the performance category, the Kona 2 might be the wing that you are looking for. A little bit different than what I am used to putting out there, this video by popular demand is going to be a product review breakdown of this glider. So I'm going to go through why my wife and I chose this glider, how it's meeting expectations, and who I would recommend this glider for. This is going to be an honest breakdown of the good and the not so good. So hit that like button for me if you're ready to get an earful on this glider. Subscribe to this educational paramotor content if you want to see more. And without any more time wasted, let's jump into why we chose the Kona 2. What drew us to the Kona to begin with was our desire for a glider that would be easy to launch at our Colorado home elevation of 8,800 feet. The Kona has a hybrid design to function as a paragliding wing with its higher angle of incidence to produce a lot of lift and a massive glide slope, while at the same time meeting the demands of a paramotor pilot looking to descend in style with its trimmed out speed and tip steering toggles. Another attractive point to this glider, especially here in the Rocky Mountains where you've got unpredictable weather, is its E&B rating and all the passive safety that comes along with it. Within the first few months of owning this glider, I had the opportunity to really put it through its paces with two of the most incredible flights I've taken. The first was a power journey over the peak of Mount Snuffles at 14,156 feet. The round trip voyage, taking all of 35 minutes, launching from 8,000 feet with a Moster 185, really showcased the glider's climbing performance even in really thin air. And as you can see here, I'm having a good amount of fun swinging around these rock formations. Those tip steering toggles really do a number for feeling in control of the glider. This is something the original Kona didn't have, by the way. The second flight was a hike and fly trip that brought tears of joy to my eyes as I soared quietly back home after sending it off a 12,000 foot peak. And I've got to say, it was the second trip that really got me buzzing for the Kona 2. This is so amazing. I mean, look at that. That is just so cool. Paragliding is really high on the list for both of us as something that we want to do more often and learn more about. So virtually having two wings in one is pretty dang sweet and makes things pretty convenient. So let's jump into some of the specs that make this glider so great. While the Kona 2 is admittedly slow when compared to other paramotor wings, this glider is incredibly efficient and will glide forever. This is due to the angle of incidence of that glider as you're hanging underneath it. So what the angle of incidence really affects is the glide slope, or the amount of sink you'll experience over a set amount of distance. I would say the average for a paramotor wing is somewhere between 6 and maybe 9 to 1 ratio. Or for every 6 feet you travel horizontally, you'll descend 1 foot. From my experience, even here at our elevation, this is closer to 12 to 1. Seriously, this thing does not want to come down. And the main features that make this possible are the features based around drag reduction. The two categories of drag in this case are parasitic and incorporated. And for a wing with such a long chord, or the distance between the front and the back of the glider, the improvements they made to both of these categories really has a significant boost. Now, I'm not on the Ozone design team, so I can't go into too much detail on either category's design improvement, and I'm not going to throw nerdy numbers at you, but I will cover what I know. For parasitic drag, Ozone adjusted the leading edge of the glider quite a bit. And this is where a lot of drag actually occurs. As air is flowing into the glider, it pressurizes and compresses, and no more air is really allowed into the glider. And so the leading edge now acts as a sort of air plow. To address this, a design feature known as shark nose came into play, and it's been well known in the industry for quite a while now. Basically what shark nose does is, if this is our cell opening, it closes the upper half of that opening and allows air that would be impacting it and getting sucked in to actually flow up and over the glider, reducing drag, therefore increasing efficiency, while also having the bonus of increasing collapse resistance. Taking this one step further, and this is specific to the Kona 2, they have put tethers between the battens, linking the top and bottom pieces of fabric together, holding the shark-nosed cell openings closed. Another pretty cool, unique feature to the Kona 2 are the sections of unsheathed lines. The nylon sheathing you find on some of the beginner to intermediate gliders are there to protect the inner Dyneema Kevlar core, but this comes at the cost of having a little bit more drag than if you were to remove that nylon sheathing. On the topic of incorporated drag, we'll take a look at the trailing edge of the wing. By incorporated drag, which is a term I made up for this video, I'm really referring to the intentional drag that occurs when you're controlling the glider with the brakes. To clarify here, the efforts being made in this category are not meant to reduce the drag altogether, as that would be problematic, but more to make this drag happen more efficiently and effectively. So traditionally, when brake pressure is applied to the trailing edge of a glider, the trailing edge is deflected pointedly, if you will, where the trailing edge is directly connected to the brake lines. While this works just fine, it requires more brake pressure than if the entire trailing edge acted as a unit, so to speak. And this is where the use of these plastic little strips all along the trailing edge come into play. Forgive me, I could not for the life of me figure out what this design feature was called, but these aid in keeping the entire trailing edge uniform as those points are being pulled down. So while with a traditional design you may have needed 5 inches of brake pressure, now you need 3 inches of brake pressure with this design to affect the same rate of turn. Again, this is all about efficiency. The less air that is getting stopped by either the brakes or the leading edge of the glider, the more efficiently your glider is going to fly. And that is the whole goal behind the design features of the Kona 2. Really quick, I want to thank all of these supportive people subscribed to my Patreon. Without their support, I cannot dedicate the time it takes to put out this level of quality content. Thank you guys. The link over to my Patreon is in the description below. So while this glider serves its designed purpose really well, there are still pros and cons that you should know before buying this glider. The first thing I noticed on my very first flight, or attempted flight, I should say, was the difficulty I had inflating it. Even at sea level, the Kona's unwillingness to sort of wake up is definitely something to get used to. With this glider being tuned trailing edge slightly heavier, it has a tendency to want to stick to the ground and makes getting through the power zone a little different. I hesitate to say challenging because it's not like it requires any more effort or a special technique to get off the ground. I would say it just takes persistence. Almost every other glider I have played with can pretty much pop off the ground and get under control with a short burst of energy and forgives lazy or sloppy technique. The Kona 2, on the other hand, requires that effort to be spread out over time and consistently, requiring near perfect form for your launches. But that being said, I like this in a way because it really forces me to step up my technique game and focus on the follow through to the inflation, which I definitely was lacking prior. Again, just to reiterate, you're not going to get this wing to pop off the ground unless you've got a decent wind. And despite the increased angle of incidence, it doesn't really want to lag back behind you unless you get really lazy. Once in flight, which by the way happens splendidly quick, its incredible climb rate is immediately noticed, as well as its lack of point A to B ability. This is definitely not meant to be a cross-country wing, but I will say if you used it as such, you would definitely be saving on fuel. With my weight, my cruise power setting is right above 15% or so. Now, while this glider is not fast, the trim range does store a surprising amount of speed range. You'll definitely notice an increase both in speed and performance if you let those trims all the way out. However, that being said, it goes against the recommendations in the user manual if you do any sort of advanced maneuvers with those trims out. Unfortunately, I cannot report on the speed bar as I haven't flown it with it yet. I like to keep things simple when I'm flying, but I know that it can add up to 5 knots to the top speed of the glider. Don't expect to get much more than 25 miles per hour out of your Kona 2. I would say a pretty close comparison to the speed is Ozone's Mojo. The other place you'll notice the lack of speed is in its playing performance. So with the Kona 2 being so slow and having that higher angle of incidence that I continue to mention, it really wants to slow you down as you're picking up speed. In a way, it makes the advanced maneuvers feel a little bit more snappy and quick as it's pitching you up through those maneuvers. However, the rate at which you're slowing down during them is a little disconcerting, and it can make those maneuvers feel a little floppy. The vocabulary is just on point today. It really does force you to capitalize on the momentum going into any sort of maneuver. Again, while you can let the trims out to help that wing carry energy through these maneuvers, it is ill-advised in the user manual, so don't do anything I would do. While this wing is certainly capable of providing an adrenaline hit, it is really designed for the slow, floaty flights, shutting down the motor at 2,000 feet and enjoying a nice sunset glide back to the car. Which brings me to the landing, and this wing flares just a little differently. While the timing is very similar to most other paramotor wings, the effort that is required during flare is noticeably greater. The plastic strips in the trailing edge that help keep it uniform during deflection means that your arms now have to overcome a little more resistance to flare completely. The pro to this, however, is that now you get a really nice slow landing even in no wind. Now the final con I'll mention is the Kona's weight. This is definitely one of the heavier gliders that I have flown. One of the big things that I looked forward to with this wing, as I mentioned, was doing hike and fly adventures. And let me tell you, after 3 hours of scrambling up mountain peaks at 12,000 feet, you definitely notice every ounce. So who is this paraglider for? First and foremost, I would recommend it to anybody who's in the sport of PPG looking to get into paragliding. I am not an experienced paraglider pilot yet, and I've only done free flying a couple of times in really benign conditions, but I can say some of the most memorable flights that I have been without a motor or with the motor shut off. And I am so grateful for this wing for making those types of flights last a little bit longer. So while this wing definitely has a defined purpose, and it may not be the most balanced wing in each category of flight, in my opinion, it really does shine as a hybrid glider. While struggling to break through my shortcutting habits I had on launch, I wasn't convinced this wing was really for us. But after going back to the basics and perfecting the technique that this glider demands, it was clear that we had made the right choice with the Kona 2. That's all I have for you guys on this wing. If you have any further questions, leave them down below in the comments. Thank you guys for watching. This is Lifted PPG. My name is Micah Stevens. Don't forget to take that deep breath, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Cheers.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.